Not that long ago, this group asked me if gambling was sin. And I was surprised at your resistance to the answer. I mean, don't ask a question if you don't want the answer. So I thought tonight we'd take a look at what God does say about gambling. First, we're going to look at the definition. The definition of gambling is the practice or activity of betting, the practice of risking money or other stakes in a game or bet. Notice it's not the game, but the risk that makes it gambling. So I'm going to begin with things you already know. Having money is not sin. The love of money is. Sex is not sin, unless it's outside of marriage. Drinking is not sin, but drunkenness is. So to the earlier question, gambling is not specifically spoken of as a sin. But you need to be honest with what is in your heart to sort through the rest of this message. Jeremiah 17:10 says, I, the Lord, search the heart and test the mind to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his deeds. God knows our hearts, even when we don't, because, we lie to ourselves sometimes. Proverbs 21:2 says, every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the heart. And that's the crux of it, isn't it? If you're even asking a question, chances are your heart may not be right. So let's talk about the man who was labeled a man after God's own heart. I'm talking about King David. And we know how he had this innocent little affair one night. It was a weak moment. She was very beautiful. Society allowed for men to have multiple wives then, and many kings had concubines besides. What was the harm? Everyone would accept that this is what kings did. So let's look at the story and talk about it. 1 Samuel 11, and we're going to look at the whole chapter for this story. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him, and all Israel, and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained at Jerusalem. Let's pause. Notice it says when kings go out to battle. We know much of David's life was spent on the battlefield. Why didn't he go this time? We could try and come up with excuses, but the fact was he didn't go. Verse 2. It happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house that he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. And David sent and inquired about the woman. And one said, Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? So David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now she had been purifying herself from her uncleanness. Then she returned to her house, and the woman conceived, and she sent and told David, I am pregnant. Now, if David had been out with his troops, he wouldn't have been bored wandering on the roof, and he never would have seen Bathsheba. I want to read another verse to you, Matthew 5:28. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So already David has sinned. And the world tells us it's okay to look at someone else and have lustful thoughts, just as long as you don't act on them. Do not ever confuse what God says with what the world accepts. Verse 6. So David sent word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent Uriah to David. And when Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab was doing and how the people were doing and how the war was going. Small talk, you know. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." And Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and did not go down to his house. And when they told David Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, "Have you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house?" And Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah dwell in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing." Uriah is quite noble. The rest of the men in his unit, did not get to go home on furlough. And Uriah was honorable enough to not take special privilege just because it was offered to him. How many of us would make the same choice? But this action ruined David's plan. Verse 12. Then David said to Uriah, "Remain here today also, and tomorrow I will send you back." And so Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. And David invited him, and he ate in his presence and drank, so that he made him drunk. And in the evening he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of his lord, but he did not go down to his house. Even drunk, Uriah acted more honorably than the king. Verse 14. In the morning David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, "Set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him, that he may be struck down and die." And as Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant men. And the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the servants of David among the people fell. And Uriah the Hittite also died. So David needed a new plot and sent the note to Joab, who was in charge of this regiment. He told him to put Uriah up front, knowing he would be killed. That is murder. Then Joab sent and told David all the news about the fighting, and he instructed the messenger, "When you have finished telling all the news about the fighting to the king, then if the king's anger rises, and if he says to you, 'Why did you go so near the city to fight? Did you not know that they would shoot from the wall?' Who killed Abimelech, the son of Jerubbesheth? Did not a woman cast an upper millstone on him from the wall, so that he died at Thebez? Why did you go so near the wall?" Joab knew that this was not good battle strategy. "Then you shall say, 'Your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also.'" So the messenger went and came and told David all that Joab had sent him to tell. The messenger said to David, "The men gained an advantage over us and came out against us in the field, but we drove them back to the entrance of the gate. But then the archers shot at your servants from the wall, and some of the king's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also." And David said to the messenger, "Thus shall you say to Joab, 'Do not let this matter displease you, for the sword devours now one and now another. Strengthen your attack against the city and overthrow it, and encourage him.'" And when the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah her husband was dead, she lamented over her husband. And when the mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. Here's the key sentence in this whole chapter. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. David thought he had accomplished his mission. He got Uriah out of the way. I mean, it's murder no matter how you look at it. And then he married Bathsheba, because that's the honorable thing to do when you get someone pregnant, isn't it? Even if you had to kill her husband first. Despite all of our understanding about David's actions and his excuses to cover up what deep down he knew was sin, he had displeased the Lord. So, what does adultery and murder have to do with gambling? Everything. You need to examine your heart to have the answer to the question, is gambling sin? Let's look at some scriptures to begin with, and then I'm going to pose some questions for you to search your own heart. Proverbs 22:7. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. The slave to the lender. We are so very opposed to slavery. We're still paying the price with civil unrest over what we did over 200 years ago. A war that ended 150 years ago. Why would we want to become slaves? Yet that is what we do when we go into debt. Now, are you familiar with the saying, neither a borrower nor a lender be? Well, that comes from God. Proverbs 22, verses 26 and 27. Be not one of those who give pledges, who put up security for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should your bed be taken from under you? If you loan money, you'll never see wealth either. One thing I've observed in life is this. People who don't have much are generally more generous with people that have lots. Be careful. There is a fine line between giving to help people, like God tells us to do, and in encouraging poor choices and poor behavior. That is not helping. So here are my heart questions, since that's what God judges. Do you gamble for fun? If so, any game would be equally entertaining. Poker without cash would be just as much fun. If you disagree with that, then you may be sinning. Do you believe that you're going to walk away with more than you started with? Then you're gambling for the money and not the entertainment, that risk factor. Proverbs 13:11 says, wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. 70% of people who get money quickly through lotteries and gambling and those types of things end up bankrupt in a short time. What do you remember about the 10 Commandments? Your gambling could fall under the sin of coveting. You know, wanting more than you've earned or are blessed with or belongs to somebody else. And that leads me to my last question. Have you truly earned this money? Or is it a gift, whether from family, friends, or even the government? Do you have the right to spend money that you received that was intended for rent, for food, for daily living expenses? Do you have the right to risk it? Because that was the definition of gambling, wasn't it? A game of risk. You've heard the phrase, a fool and his money are soon parted. Some think it comes from Proverbs 21:22, and I'm reading the King James Version here. There is treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man spends it up. And regarding the love of money thing, 1 Timothy 6:10 says this, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. We should never do anything that might lead us away from or to question our faith. And I don't want to leave you with the impression that anything to do with money is evil. Here's the verse I lean on when trying to make a financial decision. Philippians 4:19. And my God shall supply all your needs according to his riches in glory through Christ Jesus our Lord. God owns it all. If he wants me to have it, he'll provide a way for me to get it. I have one friend who was blessed with a free car 2 times in her life when she needed one. I've worked with people who were homeless or on the verge, and when they leaned completely on God, they miraculously were housed that day. God doesn't perform miracles like he did in the Bible because we don't let him. We don't believe he does that stuff. We have to fix our own problems. But I will tell you that every time I have had a financial crisis in my life that was not of my own doing, God provided. So I'm going to ask this. Where is your heart when it comes to gambling? Would you enjoy the game as much without cash involved? And someone said to me, if you want to play for money, play Monopoly. How much of your financial blessings do you give back to God? Remember, he blesses us in proportion to our generosity.